eLTER, Integrated European Long-Term Ecosystem, Critical Zone, and Socio-Ecological Research.
Great, thank you. So welcome everybody to the first eLTER SPF webinar of the year. My name is Blaise Denfeld, and I have the pleasure of introducing Igor Ogasharwara. I hope I said your last name correctly. You can correct me if I'm wrong. We'll be presenting today on aquatic remote sensing. So Igor is a member of the management team of Geo AquaWatch, and he's also a member of the Horizon 2020 project, Water Scenarios for Copernicus Exploration. So he has a lot of expertise in aquatic remote sensing that he can share with us today. And so with that, Igor, I hand the floor over to you. And I should say that after Igor's presentation, we'll have some time for any questions that you may have. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Blaise, for the introduction. We'll share my presentation here. As Blaise mentioned, I'm Igor. I'm currently at the Leibniz Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries, and in the Department of Plankton and Microbial Ecology. And today we'll talk about aquatic remote sensing, but especially on the water quality part of aquatic remote sensing. So I would like to start saying that, yeah, this is a really nice opportunity because there is this proposal in the EU to amend the Water Framework Directive, and in terms of water standards and water policy. And this is from 2022, but it is, I think it is still in the assessment and evaluation, but it's going to be implemented soon. And to highlight a specific point on this document is that they want to enable member states to make use of new monitoring techniques, including Earth observations and remote sensing. And if you see on this more specifically, or a little bit more complete way, so member states should be allowed to use data and services from remote sensing technologies. Earth observations, in this case, they are highlighting the Copernicus services, in situ sensors, devices, or citizen science data. Also creating opportunities offered by artificial intelligence, advanced data analysis, and data processing. So with this in mind, with these changes in the Water Framework Directive, I was just mentioning to Blaise before we start this talk that it's really important to understand what remote sensing is, what are these monitoring techniques using remote sensing, especially in terms of water quality, for the reporting for the Water Framework Directive. So in today's talk, we'll go a little bit more on the theory about aquatic remote sensing, especially for inland water quality. And then we'll see how much we can cover on this topic. So to start with, for the ones that are not familiar with remote sensing, so remote sensing is a way that we can record information without touching the target or with non-contact with the target from different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, so from ultraviolet, visible, infrared, and microwave regions, using cameras, scanner, lasers, linear arrays, or any type of sensor mounted in different platforms, from satellites, airplanes, drones, boats, ferries. So this is more remote sensing, is collecting the data without touching the target. And in remote sensing, we have two different types of remote sensing. One is the passive remote sensing, and the other one is the active remote sensing. The difference between those is the source of energy. So in passive remote sensing, we use sunlight as the source of energy, while in active remote sensing, the platforms, they will emit the energy, and then will record back the energy that they emitted. So there is just the main difference is, yeah, the energy source. In terms of water quality, we focus more on the passive remote sensing. So that's where I will go today, talking a little bit more on passive remote sensing. So on passive remote sensing, as we mentioned, all the sunlight gets to the Earth and then it's going to interact with the target, could be trees, urban areas, and goes back to the satellite. But we can also see in this figure, it can also interact with clouds or other things on the atmosphere, like ozone particles in the atmosphere, and then they can scatter back to the sensor in the satellite or airplane or drone. So that's the main idea of how remote sensing works is, okay, the satellite's reflecting what is, the satellite is recording what is reflected back to the satellite. And what can the satellite see? So if we're thinking on hyperspectral sensors, this is more or less what we can see on the visible to near infrared spectrum. So here in this figure, we have different components like concrete, sand, and how they reflect. And where is water? So water is in the very bottom of the image. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's very bottom the image, and see in the unit here in the y-axis is percentage reflectance. So if you see, when we are working with water, we are working very little percentage of the reflectance, so almost nothing. So we are working with less than 2% of the signal when we are working with water, but when we work with concrete, for example, we have 35% of the signal being of the reflectances. So yeah, when we're working with water is a little bit more difficult. There is very little signal, and that's what we need to work with on the aquatic remote sensing. So how it works, so how a satellite records and makes an image of that. So in the satellite, we have these sensors, and the sensors are based on detectors, optical imaging detectors and electronics. So the radiance that comes at the sensor will pass through the detectors, and those detectors will convert energy, the radiance, in digital numbers. So digital numbers then is proportional to the radiance, but digital numbers will depend on the radiometric resolution of the sensor. So it will vary according to the radiometric resolution. So what is a radiometric resolution? Is the number of bits that the sensor can record. So in an 8-bit image, we can record 256 different shades of gray in the grayscale, which means that all the energy that is recorded is then divided in 256 values of digital numbers. So that's more or less how it works. So if nowadays we have a 10-bit, 12-bit sensor, so we can get much more colors associated to the grayscale, and therefore we can divide the energy in more classes. And then in a satellite, what we do is for each band, so for each wavelength that the satellite can record or the sensor can record, we create a matrix of digital numbers, of digital values, and that's where we can create an image out of the energy that is getting from in the satellite. So in this case, what we see from the satellite, when we zoom in a satellite image, we will see pixels like this. And the pixels will be, very pixelated image with very small squares. And each square will have a digital number, and this is what we see. but what the computer is seeing a matrix. So each digital number, they will read it as a number. And that's how we can get on this grayscale and have the image. A combination of these bands, so usually a combination of 3 bands, red, green, and blue, are what we need to have true color image, or to have a colorful image. And it can be true color or false color, so it depends on what we put on this red, green, and blue. So for example, we've put the red wavelength in the red, and then green and green and blue, then we have a true color image. But we can always change. For example, we can put the near infrared band as red and the green as green and blue as blue, and then we will have a false color image that will especially show up the vegetation in red colors, because vegetation reflect a lot in the near infrared. So what are other resolutions in remote sensing? So one thing is temporal resolution, and that's figure A here. Here we see that we have different satellite sensors. So we have the MODIS that is on board of Stera and Aqua, ALTI that is on board on Sentinel-3, MSI that is on board on Sentinel-2, and OLI that is on board on Landsat 8 and Landsat 9. And here is the temporal resolution. So you can have a revisit of 2 days. Then the MSI has every 5 days, OLI has that 16 days. And in this red line is the chlorophyll RFU from the probe, and what we can capture with these different resolutions. So if we have only an image every 16 days, so with these green lines here, what is happening is with OLI, we are missing the peak of chlorophyll, for example. And if you think on the MSI, that there's these blue lines here, then yeah, we can get more or less the first peak of chlorophyll, but then we will miss the second peak, but we still get a high increase here. And with MODIS, then of these yellow lines, then we can see that, yeah, we can get much higher on the temporal resolution. So when we are looking on temporal resolution, it's important. So when we are looking for algal blooms, it's important to have a very high frequency, so a high temporal resolution. But usually, for example, when we are looking at the land part, so vegetation do not change that fast. So that's why a lot of people using Landsat for long time series of vegetation phenology, for example. The second one is spectral resolution. This is also very important in water quality remote sensing. So this is figure B. So here on figure B, we can see MODIS, ALTI, MSI, OLI, and Prisma and Daisies. So Prisma and Daisies, they are hyperspectral, so they cover in a lot of the spectra. But if you see the multispectral satellite sensors like MODIS, ALTI, MSI, and OLI, then we can see their distribution and the wavelengths where they are. So in terms of algal blooms, for example, what are sensitive to phycocyanin is around 620, which is the peak of absorption of phycocyanin. And in fact, at 620, we only have one satellite that can do that. That's ALTI. And then there is the sensitive to chlorophyll region is around 665, which is the peak of absorption in red of chlorophyll A, and also at 705 or 709, which is the peak of scattering of phytoplankton cells. So we can see that ALTI, MSI, they do have the 700 nanometers band.
Between 400 and 700, no? And this one is reaching more.
I think William, I think you're not muted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The third resolution is the spatial resolution, which is, okay, how much we can see in an image. So that's what we can see on the right side. So when we are looking for an MSI 20 meters, that's what we can see. The same image with ALTI, Prisma, and Daisies, that is a 30-meter resolution sensors. And then we can see when we go for Ulchi, then it's get coarse images. And when we go to MODIS, it's 1,000 meters. It's much coarse, the spatial resolution. So it also depends on what's the resolution you need. So if you're thinking on water quality for lakes, what we need a very high, or not very high, but high spatial resolution. We need high spectral resolution. It would be nice to have very high temporal resolution, and to have these three resolutions very high. It's quite impossible right now in our current technology, because we cannot have this type of sensors. Nowadays, there are some private companies like Planet that has these Dove drones. They are not so high on the spectral resolution, but they are daily. We can get images daily, and they are on very high spatial resolution with 3.6 meters. But we still need to develop more on technology to get more of those three resolutions to cover mostly inland waters. Another way to do that is more or less what we have for the Sentinel-2. So in this case, MSI is not a 5-day revisit, it's a 10-day revisit. But we have two Sentinel-2s. We have Sentinel-2A and Sentinel-2B. So in this case, we can reduce to 5 days revisit with both satellites. So this is how it's another way on doing that. We work on constellations, on having same sensor in different satellites working as a constellation, so we can increase the temporal resolution. And now we get to aquatic remote sensing. So water has different colors, as we can see in this image. We can have bluish to green to brown colors of the water. And this is more or less what aquatic remote sensing is about. It's about water color. So for those that I work more on ocean, that's a very known term is ocean color. And for inland waters, we are trying to establish the lake color. But of course, inland waters has reservoirs and other types of environments, ponds. So maybe lake color is not the most representative term. But we're still working on having a terminology for that. But we can just say here watercolor. And what happens in watercolor, what drives watercolor? So there are three main components that drives the watercolor. One is phytoplankton. So phytoplankton with their associated pigments. One is DOC, organic, so dissolved organic carbon. And that, of course, is the color part. So the colored suborganic carbon or matter, and suspended sediments. And what is happening in the aquatic remote sensing is that we have incident solar radiance. So we have a large amount of energy that reaches to the lake. But as we saw in that other previous figure, only a very little part goes back to the satellite. So the water leaving radiance is very small. And here we have what we call apparent optical properties. They vary with the light path. And then we also have the inherent optical properties that they do not vary with the light path. They are inherent to the constituents. So for example, the absorption of pigments. So we do not change the absorption is always there, and it's related to the pigments as well as the scattering. So those are more inherent optical properties. Light attenuation is an apparent optical property because it depends on the geometry of the incident light, so it can vary with the light path. So again, to this figure, and this is mostly to show again that water, we are talking about a very small part of the signal that goes back. But now I will go to a little bit more. So here we are talking about percentage reflectance, or just reflectance. And this is a term that is usually used on land remote sensing. And for that, how they calculate reflectance in land is just ratio. So the upwelling irradiance divided by the downwelling irradiance. So everything that is going up or going back to the satellite divided by everything that comes down. So everything that the light from the sunlight is the ED, the downwelling. That's the total light that we have, and EU is upwelling, what's coming up. However, for aquatic remote sensing, it doesn't work like that because we have different things. So one thing that we also have for land is atmosphere. So atmosphere can also contribute to the signal that the satellite is reading. And then we have these reflected surfaces on the water, and that's the red line here. And this image, for example, is an image of Lake Stechling here in our Gloucester in Germany, where we have the Lake Lab. That is my background. The Lake Lab is our mesocosmos facility. And what we are seeing here is just the surface water is the reflection of the sky. And this is more or less what this red line represents here. So this is something that we do not want. What we want is the green line here. Green line is the sunlight that penetrates in the water column, interacts with the constituents in the water column, and goes back to the satellite or goes back out of the water as a water leaving radiance. So if we think on that formula of reflectance in land, and if we replace the upwelling irradiance to the upwelling radiance, and if we consider that upwelling radiance is only these three: atmosphere, the reflection of the surface, and the water leaving, what we really want is only the water leaving. So remote sensing reflectance, which is a terminology that we use in aquatic reflectance, is the water leaving radiance divided by the downwelling irradiance. And since we have radiance irradiance, then we have a unit. So this is another difference point. Usually in land remote sensing, reflectance has no unit, while in aquatic remote sensing, the remote sensing reflectance has a unit, which is per steradian, which is the solid angle. So this is one difference that we have on aquatic remote sensing and land remote sensing. So how light interacts in different types of water. So in clean ocean water, we will see that blue light can penetrate a lot. There's a lot of signals in the blue light. And when we go to coastal water, most of the signals is in green. And when we go to lakes, most of the signal is in red. That's why, for example, when we have these fluorescence probes, we can choose if we want the chlorophyll in blue, which is mostly for very clean ocean waters, or if we have the chlorophyll in red, because that's mostly suitable for turbid waters, for more lakes. So this is mainly the principle why. So in ocean color, most of the light is in blue, and that's why remote sensing for ocean color is trying to use most of the blue and green bands. Instead, in lakes, we try to use more on the red part of the signal, because that's where we have most of the signal that we can use. So there's now we are talking about the difference between ocean and inland waters. So there's these two differences here. And how these differences in ocean and inland waters, we can see it from the satellite data or from reflectance data. So in this case, we are talking about reflectance data measured in situ. So not by the satellites, but using spectroradiometers. So first, let's see how ocean color looks like. So the reflectance of ocean color is like this. So as we saw before, most of the reflectance signal is in blue and decreasing towards red. But they have very specific shapes. So this is more of an Italian spectra from different places: Gulf of Maine, North Atlantic, Mid-Atlantic, Labrador Sea, Equatorial Pacific. But they all have this similar shape, higher in blue and going down to red. And then when we think on optical or the reflectance for inland and coastal waters, that's more or less what we have, which is a big mess, and it can be everything. So in this study, there are more than 4,000 spectra, reflectance spectra, from 250 inland waters, 14 coastal cruises. And what was done to, well, there's not so much we can understand in these plots here, in these two plots, but what was done by using a K-means algorithm on the remote sensing reflectance, we can try to sort some different classes or clusters of remote sensing reflectance signals. So we can see, for example, this gray dashed line looks like the ocean one, so probably it's from a coastal or clean coastal water or oligotrophic lake with more blue signal. But for all of the others, we have much more signal in green and some in red, or some even this nice peak here on 700 that is caused by the scattering of phytoplankton cells. And this one here, which is really rich in sediments. So we can see that it's just grow from blue to green and keeps almost a plateau until the near infrared. And then due to the absorption of water, it decreases. And this red one here, which is a bloom, a surface bloom. So it looks like a vegetation. So this red one looks like a vegetation. So we have the green peak because of the green color of the bloom, and then a very high near infrared reflectance. So in inland waters, coastal waters, we can have a very mix of constituents, which causes different optical water types and a very mixed signal. So to show again the difference between ocean color and inland water color. And then there is atmospheric correction. So as we mentioned, when we are trying to use satellite remote sensing or even airborne and drone, we need to do atmospheric correction. Why atmospheric correction? Because there are things in the atmosphere that can change. And this is done for land as well. But in land, what we're trying to look is what is in the atmosphere. For example, this what is reflected in the atmosphere by ozone, particles in the atmosphere, like this blue line here, this LA as reflected from the atmosphere and goes to the sensor. But in water, we need to do much more corrections because we also have the glint and the sun glint, are those red arrows. And we also have this specular reflections from the sky, which is the blue one, because what we really want is the green one. So to get the green one, we need to correct the blue, the red, the gray arrows. So this is one thing from aquatic remote sensing that is common for both an ocean color and inland water. But for inland water, there is another one, which is this other figure here, which is the land part. So sometimes the satellite is not seeing the land, but the land signal can interfere in what satellite is seeing. So the sunlight interacts with the land changes their angle because of particles in the atmosphere, and they can go back to the satellite. So in this case, what we want is number 1 here, and we need to remove number 2, which is the bottom effect, also from the inland water. Sometimes if the water is very clean, then we can see the bottom. So what we are really seeing is what we see in the bottom, but not in the water column. So we also need to correct for bottom reflect. We need to correct for the 3, which is the surface. We have to correct for 4, which is the atmosphere. And we also need to correct for 5, which is the adjacency effects. So as we can see, for water, aquatic remote sensing atmospheric correction is more complex than land atmospheric correction, and also inland inland waters atmospheric correction is also more complicated than ocean atmospheric correction, because we are just increasing the number of factors that are affecting on the satellite image. To show how different this is, so in the red line here is the reflectance of top atmosphere, so without any atmospheric correction. In the green line is the surface reflectance, which is using a land atmospheric correction. And in blue is the remote sensing reflectance, which uses an aquatic atmospheric correction. So we can see how much it changes from a non-atmospheric corrected to a land atmospheric corrected and from an aquatic atmospheric correction. Also highlighting the need to do this aquatic atmospheric correction, otherwise we will not have a good estimation of the signals from the water to the satellite. And thinking on satellite products, then we talked a little bit about the different processing levels or products. So we have level 0, which is just the raw data with digital numbers. Level 1, which is done some atmospheric correction. So we have the total radiances, or also geometric correction. So we know where we are. We have the coordinates. Level 2 is atmospheric correction and optical properties. So we need to run through atmospheric correction. And level 3 is where we start aggregating products or creating water quality products in level 3. So how to retrieve water quality information from first the signal or from reflectance. So one thing that we can look on reflectances in on the hyperspectral reflectances are some signals of specific pigments or specific constituents. So one thing is chlorophyll. So chlorophyll in blue is here on 443. But for inland waters, this chlorophyll is usually masked by sedum, colored silver organic matter, that also absorbs a lot in the UV to the blue area. Then we have this peak in green, which is usually related to the total suspended solids. In some signals, we can observe the phycocyanin absorption at 620. The chlorophyll absorption is usually what we can mostly see at 665. And then there's this peak again for scattering of particles, including phytoplankton particles in the very near infrared. So this is based on these features or optical features or spectral features is how we try to develop remote sensing algorithms to estimate water quality parameters. So there are different types of models where which we can use. So there are forward and inverse. The forward is where we go from pigments concentrations, then we calculate the absorptions, and then we calculate reflectance. But when we are using satellite, what we are using, in fact, is the inverse approach. So we go from the reflectances or remote sensing reflectance that the satellite can measure, then we can go and obtain the absorptions, and from the absorptions, we can obtain the concentrations. This is the most analytical, semi-analytical or quasi-analytical approach, but we can also have empirical or semi-empirical approaches that goes from reflectance straight to the pigments without passing through the IOPs, without passing through the absorptions and scattering properties. And those are the most common ones, the empirical and semi-empirical ones. Usually when we do, for example, machine learning or artificial intelligence, what we are doing is also on this line here, because we put the reflectances and we put the concentrations of the water quality. And then that's more or less what artificial intelligence is also using, is going from reflectance to the constituents as well. So there are many remote sensing algorithms. So for example, in this paper here from Claire Neal from University of Stirling, she was looking, okay, so how to retrieve chlorophyll concentrations, and then she analyzed some algorithms that are much more than those. So there are many remote sensing algorithms, how to choose the best one or how we choose one. Because yeah, there are so many how we know which one we need to use. And if you choose the wrong one, we can get very wrong results. And this is what I will show here in this next slide. So here are 4 different types of algorithms or models for retrieving chlorophyll estimation. Number 1 here is OC2, is ocean color 2. But we see that the range of chlorophyll is very low. And what is showing here is that for this coastal area, we have much more chlorophyll than, for example, in inland waters, which is probably not correct. But again, ocean color, they use mostly blue and green bands. And in inland waters, we have a lot of organic matter which absorbs in green, so the signal is mixed, so not a good estimation. Then we have the Gillerson approach, which is a 3-band model. Those cover a different range from 0 to 147. And here makes more sense. Like for these smaller lakes, we have more chlorophyll. For these larger lakes, medium chlorophyll. And in the coastal area, we have a little bit less. If you see another one from Gons, this one just showing there's no variation in the coastal area. We can see some variation in the inland. And then there's a blended algorithm, which the concentration here varies from 0 to 27 micrograms only. And the blended algorithm tries to use a mix of different algorithms based on some specific optical water types. And then we can have this type of correction, which also makes sense with inland waters having higher chlorophyll concentrations than coastal waters going to the ocean. So if you choose the wrong algorithm, then we can get very strange results. So we need to know how to choose and how to do that. One way to do that and to improve the way we select is looking for optical water types. So what are optical water types? Optical water types are waters that have similar properties or optical properties. So in this case here is optical water types in Australia from a paper from Boda and colleagues and collaborators from CSIRO in Australia. And what they are doing is in these blue tones are the coastal waters, and in the yellowish reddish tones are the inland waters in Australia. And what they have is the remote sensing reflectance, and they just cluster those in different groups or different optical water types. The idea of having optical water types is we can observe, of course, the distribution of these water masses or just water clusters or water colors. We can build empirical algorithms that only works for a specific optical water type, and we can establish adaptive frameworks. So, for example, for water type 1, we use this algorithm. For water type 2, is this algorithm, like what was proposed in this paper from Claire Neal from University of Stirling. And this is more or less what she has on the paper. So she identified 13 optical water types. And then she created this decision tree based on the optical water type. So if you know the variability, if you don't know, just use model C. If you know the variability and if it's oligotrophic, so for optical water types 3, 9, and 13, use model M. For blue or green water, mesotrophic waters, or optical water types 1, 2, 4, 5, 11, and 12, use model C. And for hypertrophic, 6, 7, 8, and 10. So with optical water types, we can figure out what are the best arguments for this specific optical water type. So this is a way of improve and how to select. So do you know what is your optical water type in your lake or not? And then you select it based on the optical water type. So how we improve the current atmospherical remote sensing algorithms. One, we need to improve uncertainty. So from the from the Earth observation perspective, we still need to remove uncertainties in the products. So, for example, if we remember in the proposal for amendment of the Water Framework Directive, they mentioned the Copernicus product. So we need to reduce the Copernicus products, and Copernicus products for inland waters. There is only turbidity and trophic index that is available for some lakes. So we still need to improve the uncertainty and create more products as well. Improve atmospheric correction by collection of in situ radiometry, and improve remote sensing algorithms by matching up with water quality data. And from in situ sensing, things that we show that we still need is a lot of inherent optical properties, more absorption data that is needed, absorption per unit mass, which is the specific absorptions, dowelling, upwelling, light fields, so measuring more of these reflectances in situ to understand more on how much optical water types we have. And also we need to start measuring suspended particle matter or total suspended solids, more or less the same thing, sedum, absorption, and pigments. Those are mostly the data from water quality that we need to get with matchup data. So matchup satellite passages or also in situ data. So when you go to the field, getting the samples, also measuring reflectances into the field will be really good for trying to improve these remote sensing algorithms and remote sensing products. We talked a little bit about the Water Force. So Water Force was a Horizon Europe project, ended in December last year. But in this project, we are trying to write a roadmap for Copernicus. So that was our goal. It's our main product is to write a roadmap for Copernicus about water products. So we engage more than 800 people, and we engage different groups like stakeholders, scientific working groups on different fields like water quality, water quantity, in situ and Earth observations activities, and also modeling. And combining all these inputs from the scientific community stakeholder needs, we wrote this roadmap for Copernicus, which is now under review by European Commission. But as soon as it's approved, we will make it available to everyone. But one thing that I wanted to highlight are the bottlenecks that we observed for Copernicus program. So one is the lack of a dedicated in situ component. So Copernicus is making these products, these remote sensing products, but there are no in situ component. So it's not very well validated, the Copernicus products for water quality, for example. There's a limited trust in Copernicus water products. So, for example, if we see programs that are using satellite data, they are not using Copernicus products, they are developing their own products. For example, in Finland, Sika developed this TAFKA program or system that they are processing their own satellite data with European satellite data with their own algorithms, but not using the Copernicus water products. Lack of compatibility between Earth observations and EU directives, it's changing, especially now in the Water Framework Directive. Fragmentation of existing Copernicus services. There are 6 Copernicus services, and kind of all 6 Copernicus services they produce water-related products. Sentinel sensors are still suboptimal for inland waters. So what we would not, that's the thing that we were talking before about resolutions. What we need is a high frequency, a high spectral, and a high spatial resolution for inland waters. But maybe it's going to change in the future if the future of the Sentinel-2 satellites, lack of funding mechanisms to support an inland water portfolio for Copernicus, lack of awareness within key communities, and the water domain is still not recognized within Copernicus program. So take-home message is that atmospheric correction is crucial. So we need to do atmospheric correction, especially an aquatic atmospheric correction. If you're looking for aquatic or inland water sites, remote sensing, they need to be appropriate selected for your system. So we need to also remember that there's seasonality. So maybe your lake has one optical water type during spring, another one during summer, and another one during fall. So you need to remember to check the seasonality as well. And remote sensing products, we need to improve them, especially by matching up with more in situ data and satellite passages to better calibrate the products. And I think, yeah, that's mostly what I want to cover for today. Thank you so much for your attention.